There was a kid I was in junior high with that used to like to pluck hair off a girl's head.
Dear.
And then tie a little noose behind it. He'd catch a fly.
What?
And not kill it and tie it behind their eyes.
Come on, no.
And then have a fly on a leash.
No, that is not true.
That is absolutely true.
There's no way. There's no way. There's no way.
I can actually remember that kid's name, but I'm not going to say it on a recording.
There's no way.
It's time for another episode of Charbroiled Chats. What are they talking about this time? Only one way to find out. Let's listen in.
We talked to Rick about art for a long time. So let's talk about Rick's other passion.
See,
fishing.
this is why I say to everyone, are you serious? Because everything that Walt says, you're never quite sure if it's serious or not.
Right. I get that all the time.
Yeah.
My kids have always accused me of that they are never sure. And now I've given up because my kids are so much funnier than me that I just mostly try to keep from getting, shots directed at me.
It's a deadpan thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
deadpan. That's the best word in the world.
Yeah.
Pat Paulson.
So I had a question.
My father looks like Pat Paulson. People always used to say he looked like, a cross between Pat Paulson and Ricardo Montalban.
Wow.
Huh.
Yeah.
So kind of a tall, narrow head.
No.
No.
He looks more like Ricardo, but his demeanor is more like Pat. But you could see, if you put Ricardo and Pat together, you could see like the similarity.
That's pretty funny.
Anyway, yes, Walt, you were saying?
Okay. Well, fishing, Rick. I listened to your podcast, and the thing that hit me right off, you're talking to somebody, and he said, so-and-so is a fisher. That struck me as odd.
That might be, delivery at the door, but my security details on it.
It's just that when I was a kid, it was all fishermen.
When I use that term, I guess to me on some level it's respectful. There's way more of us out there than you would think that it's not a hobby. It's part of your life. I think that's what I'm meaning when I use that term.
No, I'm sure it's the term to use.
Oh, I'm not sure it is.
Grace is a sewist. In the old days, she might have been a seamstress.
Yeah, but wasn't Jesus a fisher of men? No, wait, was that the phrase?
Yeah,
He's a fisher of men.
Yeah, that's a phrase for sure. But it just wasn't used that way. I never heard.
No, you're right.
I'm a fisher. Nobody would say that.
I may have picked it up too. A friend of mine, Mark Hieronymus up in Alaska.
Hieronymus? Like Bosch?
Yeah, like Bach. I think that's kind of maybe one of his slang references. We fished together with some other guys, had just a crazy fun trip up in Alaska. You're living with guys for 5-6 days, and who knows what you come away with. Other than, maybe a hangover and sore sides from laughing.
We should plug your podcast, even though you're a direct competitor. Go ahead.
This is just like when John Lovitz used to do Harvey Fierstein, right? Fierstein.
Right.
And he used to say, plug away.
What's happened to John Lovitz?
I don't know. I think he was on Dana Carvey's podcast once, but I just haven't heard that episode.
I keep wondering if he went into directing or something.
He doesn't seem like a director to me.
Anyway, so my son and I do a podcast, The River Rambler, which was, I guess, instigated by my daughter Emily, who produces a couple of podcasts for the law firm she's with in New York.
But why does that sound like a serial killer?
The River Rambler?
Yeah.
Actually, when she announced to me that I was going to have a podcast, I said, no, I'm not, because first off, I don't really know what they are. And secondly, I don't know enough about art to talk about art on a podcast. And she said, Dad, not about art, about fishing. And I immediately thought, if I was like a professional, I could write off my fishing expenses.
Oh, yeah, you could.
But then she said, I already named it for you. And I said, oh, come on. And she said, you're going to be the River Rambler. And I immediately said, no, I'm not. And she said, why not? And I said, because there's a book called The River Why. It's a classic in fishing literature, probably one of the best 2 or 3 books ever written that includes fishing. And that sounds like the name the father of the main character would go by if he had a podcast and he was a douchebag.
Wow.
And I don't want to be that douchebag. And
The River Rambler.
my son said, too late, Dad, I already bought it for you.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, too late, Dad, you already are.
Yeah. Well, He would have said that if he hadn't been busy buying the name. And then it's turned out that actually, probably because I'm a douchebag, people like it. I have people laughing all the time that they think it's appropriate. So it might be because I can't hold a train of thought. I don't know. It's turned out to be a lot of fun. The reason Emily pointed me at it was because as long as they've been alive, I like to visit. I was raised to visit by two visity people.
Visity.
What is visity? What does that mean?
My folks, first off, they entertained a ton.
Oh.
My folks would entertain them at home, and all of us kids had to come and introduce ourselves. It was horrifying as a kid, but it also, even as a shy kid, if you put me in a room of adults, I could function because I knew, how to just visit with people. My buddy Coop is probably my primary fishing buddy, and in Florida one year, he was giving me grief. He loves to fish the flats. And I think fishing the flats is like watching paint dry.
What's the flats? I don't know what that is.
The flats is the closer you get to the equator, the smaller the tides are.
Really?
Rather than like up in Alaska where you might have a 15-foot tide, in Florida you might have, 12-inch or 18-inch tide.
Who knew?
I had no idea.
But I think partly as a result of that and partly as a result of the topography, that 18-inch tide might take 3 hours to flow out over a very gradually receding piece of land that is just alive with sea life.
So, like, even at the ocean's edge in, like, Florida, that's true?
Oh, yeah. It goes in and out.
I never realized the tides are like that.
Yeah, I didn't know either. Because I feel like, walking on beaches in, like, Miami or something that...
Did you guys pay attention in science class?
Not to that, I guess. Holy crow. I do know why it's hotter in August, even though there's less hours of sunshine. I do know that from earth science. But other than that, maybe nothing. That's so interesting. Who knew? And so they call any place around there the flats, and it's really boring to fish.
Well, not any. Well, because the flats depend. Like if you're certain places in Florida, it'll drop off pretty deep, and at the same time, even up in Cape Cod and stuff, there's big flat areas. There's nutrients passing across it all the time, and it's a great place for people without boats to find fish, and people with boats will come in a boat that can go in really shallow water and fish those areas. This said, I know next to nothing about saltwater fishing. If I'm not fishing with Coop in saltwater, I'm pretty much lost.
Just wait for the tide to go out and then go pick up the fish that don't make it.
You want to fish when the tide is receding or coming in.
Why?
Because then they're on the move.
And then what you're looking for is the way the current is just almost like in a river. It will break around different formations, causing current lines, seam lines within the current that make it easier for fish to hold and intercept fish and intercept different sources of food, shrimp, crab, little worms, eels, all kinds of things that might be flowing with that current as the tide comes in and out. That actually, to me, is the part that makes sense because essentially then you're fishing a giant river.
Right.
Yeah.
I grew up fishing anything from tiny to small trout streams and then eventually fell in love with steelhead fishing, which is kind of all I really want to do anymore.
Steelhead is a kind of fish.
Steelhead is a ocean migrating rainbow trout.
Oh.
It is a trout that acts like a salmon.
Oh, interesting.
The one difference being that salmon, when they come up and spawn, die, and steelhead don't necessarily die. They might die of exhaustion, but they are capable of 2 or 3 or even 4 migrations before they die off.
We should make clear, I think, for all the fishers, or I like to say fishists.
Fishies, did you say?
Fishists, like sewist.
Oh, fishists. Wow.
Fishist.
Very hard to say.
Okay, well.
Fishist.
For all those people tuning in to hear about fishing, I think we should point out that I heard you say somewhere, Rick, you participate in the most obscure form of fishing.
Not probably of all fishing, but of fly fishing.
Okay.
Oh.
It's kind of...
I didn't know there were different kinds.
Oh, yeah.
Who knew?
To back up a little bit, I started fishing when I was 3 with my Uncle David. And my Uncle David was just a wonderfully kind and gentle guy who'd come home from World War II and decided to be a carpenter, bought a little piece of land along a creek in Enterprise, Oregon, and built a house. And based on that, he would essentially say, I'm David Rich, I'm a carpenter. If you'd like to see my work, come look at my house. And he built a career out of that. But his passion outside of his work was hunting, fishing, foraging, all of that. He and my Aunt Ada didn't have kids, and he was constantly, giving his niece, my mom, a chance to fish. Didn't really take with her. And then any other little kid that came along. And I showed up, and he helped me catch my first fish. Fish came out of the water, and I was done. I wanted to fish.
Why is that, Rick?
I've no idea. I think it is a core primal thing.
Huh.
Yeah, my nephew, the one who collects fossils, also fishes. It was the same thing with him. He's 18 now, but he can literally go out for 8 hours a day. 12 hours a day. And he went on this trip with his Boy Scout troop where they went they did ocean fishing, on this, big fishing boat. And it's obviously something that some people just glom onto,
Yeah, it's funny what we get imprinted with. I think when you're, they say 7 years old is the ideal age, but 3 through 12, I think kids, you never know. They're just going to hook into something, so to speak.
Yeah.
When I was about probably 7 or 8, probably in between cartoons, American Sportsman came on. They were Atlantic salmon fishing, and it was the first time I'd seen fly fishing. And I had no idea what it was, but I saw these graceful lines being thrown in the air. And I realized that my fishing pole that my Uncle David had given me was a fly rod. And I was immediately obsessed with fly fishing.
What's the big difference between fly? I mean, I know what they look like, right? Fly fishing versus the rod and reel. But what is the big difference?
Other forms of fishing, whether it's bait or lures or plugs or whatever, or trolling is a whole different thing. But if you're throwing a lure out into the water, you're using the weight of the lure to pull a very light line behind you.
Mm-hmm.
With fly fishing, for the most part, you're using a lure that weighs next to nothing.
Yeah.
And you use the mass of the line to propel it out to it.
Okay.
And so that requires a length of line that has mass to it to be propelled through the air. I don't know how else to explain it than that. If you've seen somebody fly fishing, well,
yeah,
there are beautiful loops of line. People will say all the time now that, the movie A River Runs Through It,
right.
They fell in love with fly fishing. And I'm like, I loved the book.
Uh-huh.
I wish they never made the movie because I used to fish by myself all the time.
Oh.
Because the thing I still love is to fish alone or with 1 or 2 people.
So when you're casting, you say it's a beautiful, the shape of the line makes in the air, and
there's a lovely grace to it.
And what you're trying to do is place that fly in a position where there might be a fish that would be attracted.
Yeah, it's a little bit like we were talking about with the ocean in a river. If you're looking at a river and thinking it's just a flow of water that goes along, it's going to take you forever to find fish. And probably learning with my uncle from the time I was 3 till the last time I got to fish with him, I was 19. I learned where fish live. And where fish want to live in moving water is a place that protects them from predators, that brings them a flow of food, and gives them the temperature and oxygen that they need.
So you do not fly fish in an ocean?
Oh, yeah, you can.
You can?
Yeah. It's a different approach, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
That kind of started developing in the... Fly fishing itself developed, 1600.
Okay.
Ocean fly fishing developed probably starting in the 40s and 50s. That was early guys.
The 1640s and 1650s?
No. 19.
Okay.
Yeah, so 500 years later.
Not the Complete Angler, is that first book or something?
That's not the first one.
No.
Dame Juliana Berners wrote the first one. This is making me show you what a lousy scholar I am, because my high school English paper was the literary history of fly fishing.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's kind of funny to admit that I didn't even have to go to the library because I had amassed such a pile of fly fishing books by then. I just wrote it all out of my own fly fishing books.
And so why do you read about fly fishing? Because not everyone who does something necessarily reads about it.
No, and it's actually funny. This is going to sound biased and snooty, and I don't mean it to. There's more stuff about fly fishing that's appealing that way, more narrative stuff than I think you'll find than other forms of fishing.
I think the writing applies to other sports too. Fly fishing gets more writers interested, like baseball does.
Yeah.
And golf, maybe.
I would agree with that.
Certain sports seem to attract writers.
Oh, I get what you're saying.
One thing, because there's a lot of contemplation in
Mm-hmm.
in fly fishing. And I suspect you're right on that, Walt. The other thing I
You know what?
point out is
what
after,
else gets a lot?
Go ahead.
Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead, Grace.
I was going to say, you know what else gets a lot of people writing about it? Mountaineering disasters.
Yeah.
Mountaineering in general, but it's the disasters that kind of get
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Here's another term I heard on Rick's podcast that you'll like, Grace.
Mm-hmm.
Slinging flies.
Slinging flies.
We're out there slinging flies.
That's appealing. It's like slinging hash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Slinging flies.
That would be more like streamer fishing.
What's that?
Well, it's a fly that imitates a minnow, and it's gotten really popular in like the last 10 years. It's kind of the I'll take crap for this. It's the macho side of fly fishing right now.
Wow.
That and what they call predator fishing, where you're fishing for things like muskie and big-toothed.
You don't mean the fly imitates a minnow. You mean you send out a fly, what is called a fly. It's not an insect.
No, you're throwing out a fly, but it's tied to imitate a minnow. And say if you're fishing for muskie, that fly might be 12 or 14 inches long.
Right.
Because what you're actually trying to imitate is like a sucker or a big perch or something like that.
And when you say fly, you don't mean insect. You mean the thing that goes on the end of the line.
No, the hand-tied fly.
Right. Okay. I was thinking, I don't know why I was thinking.
But this is...
I was thinking that's a really smart fly that could imitate a fish.
Imitate a minnow. Wow. You've got your flies trained, Rick.
Yeah, they're actually calling. They're out there making little minnow noises. There was a kid I was in junior high with that used to like to pluck hair off a girl's head,
Dear.
and then tie a little noose behind he'd catch a fly and not kill it and tie it behind their eyes.
What?
And then have a fly on a leash.
Come on. No.
That is absolutely true.
No, that is not true. That is not true. There's no way. There's no way. There's no way.
I can actually remember that kid's name, but I'm not going to say it on a recording.
There's no way.
Wasn't there like in every class, there was that one kid that no matter where you were would find a frog or a snake or something?
Well, I was really in the middle of it. I mean, we were in the suburbs, but it was the first ring suburb of Buffalo, so there weren't that many snakes and frogs out there.
Not country kids.
Oh, full of garter snakes and frogs out there.
Well, not that the kids found. I don't think I ever had a kid find. You know, we had to go camping to find those things.
Well, you didn't know about tides, so I don't think you were paying attention to
I don't.
the earthier kids.
You know, I'm not really a nature. I mean, I love being outside and all that, but do I know much about nature? No. Except for mountaineering disasters. That's about it.
That's kind of
that's
your spike for knowledge.
Oh, that's my obsession is mountaineering disasters, although it's related to my fear of heights. Anyway, go on.
You said your most obscure form of fishing. What's the spey fishing?
Fly fishing developed, say, from the 1600s on, and at some point in Scotland on the River Spey, it's a very steep hillsided river. You know, you don't come down a steep hillside and go into a shallow river. You go right into a steep banked riverbed. And so if you want to fly fish, there's no room to backcast.
Oh.
Because with fly fishing, if you have 30 feet of line in the air, you need to have 30 feet of room behind you.
Yeah, I can understand that, actually. I get that.
So there's a form of a cast called a roll cast that uses the surface tension of the water to hold the tip of your line in front of you while you develop a curve next to you off the water, and then you use the surface tension of that water on that tip to load your rod and then send your line forward.
Well, you know why that's arcane? It's because it sounds freaking hard to do.
It is hard to do.
Yeah.
That's actually what attracts people to fly fishing is...
It ain't easy.
There's amazing gear fishermen. If you go to an outdoor trade show, which I've never been, I've seen videos of them and stuff, but there'll be guys with gear rods doing casting demonstrations that'll blow your doors off. You can't.
So what do they do that's so special? The length that they can go or the height that they can achieve? I mean, the accuracy? Okay.
The length, the accuracy, trick casting, all kinds of weird stuff. But with a lot of fishing, for one reason or another, I think it probably has something to do with the same reason. Maybe there's more literature about it, or at least more writing about it. Literature to me is kind of a higher bar. There's a difficulty to fly casting that is appealing. With Spey was kind of obscure until the development of graphite technology came out of NASA and got swapped over into golf clubs and fly rods, and probably other things too. Not that I'm interested in.
You were talking to somebody about like 17, 18-foot rods?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And
two-handed Is spay fishing all two-handed?
Yeah, there's some people doing it with single hand now, but it really is a two-handed thing.
That's a long rod.
Yeah.
I have spay rods from 11 to 15 feet, and I kind of have lust after a 16 or 17, probably 16 footer. Those rods use lines from 20 to 60 feet.
Huh.
It goes beyond roll casting to a spay cast. And there are several different forms of spay casting. And the thing about it is you can't cover the water as, I guess, microscopically effectively as you can with bait or with some gear.
Mm-hmm.
There's water that you can't get a good fly presentation to.
What does fly presentation mean?
Getting your fly in front of a
Okay.
fish that's going to eat it.
It's like the presentation at a restaurant.
Wow. You don't know anything about fishing, Grace.
No, I know nothing. I have fished, though, and I do like it.
I think about fly fishing. I think I would like that. I like the idea of it. It's romantic in a way. There's something about being out there alone and freezing your feet off. But when I think about sitting in a boat fishing or sitting on a dock, that doesn't have any appeal at all.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
I got nothing for that.
Well, I think that being on a boat is so appealing.
I like being on a boat, but then unless you're on the ocean, then you're.
Yeah.
I'd rather just be on the boat and not fish than to be on the boat and fish.
Huh. You'd rather be speeding on the boat, Walt. Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't like motorboats either.
Oh, okay.
So is there a hierarchy, like spay is at the top and then there's fly fishing and then way at the bottom is crappie fishing?
I don't know. I don't think so. It's to me, it's more what you find appealing. Right now, in the western United States where steelhead are native, the runs are decimated. There are so many environmental factors against steelhead surviving right now that one of the reasons I like steelheading or spay fishing for them, it's probably the least effective way of fishing for them. Fishing with bait would be the most effective. Fishing with lures that like beads or yarn that looks exactly like bait would be the second most effective way. Fishing with spoons or a couple of different lures would be the next most. And then spay is a long way down.
Oh.
And
grenades are popular too.
Yeah, grenades would do it.
I keep thinking of spearfishing.
There's actually a hole on a tributary of the North Umpqua called the Dynamite Hole. And for about the past 20 years, there's been a keeper on it because traditionally guys would go in with dynamite and take fish.
With dynamite.
Well, because at any given time during the steelhead run, there might be anywhere from 20 to 200 fish in there.
But doesn't the dynamite blow them up?
If it doesn't blow them up, it stuns them, and you can just go grab them.
So going out on the flats with dynamite is really the lowest form.
It's the lowest form of anything.
If you light up a fuse or pull a pin, I think you've taken yourself out of any form of sportsman's class.
Yeah, it's like using an AK-47 with a deer.
I'm not going to call you a fisher.
Right. It would be better for the podcast, though, Rick, if you just claimed kind of the elite top of the hierarchy of fishing as your own.
But I can't do that because it's me. The single most effective fisherman I know is Willie Loman.
I thought he was a salesman.
No, he was not. And he's retired now. He is a devastatingly effective fisherman. He can be fishing your neighborhood curb during storm or the flats someplace out in the Pacific. He's going to catch the most, the biggest,
I think you're making your cat hungry.
the most amazing fish, and probably more than anybody else on a trip. I love this guy to death. He is a wonderful human being as well.
He's a fish whisperer.
Yes, or more like a fish assassin, except that he lets almost everything go.
Rick, you said that you mostly do that, right? You let things go. Do you ever eat what you catch?
Oh yeah. If I catch a stocked fish, stocked steelhead,
And how would you?
which I have not
How
since
would you know?
when they stock steelhead par, they trim off the adipose fin, which is a little tiny
Oh.
fin between the tail and the dorsal fin. So when you see a stocked fish, you know it immediately.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it's been pretty widely proven, with lots of argument against, that stocking steelhead is devastating to wild steelhead.
Huh.
So most of us who are fans of wild steelhead will do our best to keep every stocked fish we catch. But back to Willie. Willie, when we were fishing together in Alaska, he accused me of liking casting more than fishing.
Oh, that's funny.
It was kind of funny because we were catching silver salmon where my friends I was with were catching like 40 and 50 in a day.
Whoa.
To me, catching 8 or 10 silver salmon, and I'm kind of silver salmoned out for the day. I don't need to catch anymore.
You really like the casting more than the catching?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
He was incorrect there.
Do you have to develop certain muscles to cast well? Like muscles that you don't usually use?
I would say, kind of, but it's not power. It's
Right.
technique. Speorama is where this competing goes on, which kills me every time I say it.
How do you spell spay anyway?
Spey. It's based from the River Spey in Scotland. And can you say Scotland without saying Scotland?
I can't, yeah.
Yeah.
And so can you practice that technique like when you're not on the water? Do people do that, or do you have to be on the water?
If you really want to practice, you want water, because everything is based on the surface tension. There's different ways of getting around that, but it's not as good as the water. And moving water is better.
What's the process when you're going fishing? Do you think about it the night before and look up the weather and pick out your flies? How does that work?
Okay, I'm only going to talk from now on about spey fishing for steelhead, because otherwise you just ask like a 6.5 hour question.
Right.
Yeah, like why is the sky blue?
Or actually, I would say, what color blue is the sky?
Yeah, right.
You know how guys are notorious for not being multitaskers?
Right.
I think about steelheading all the time. All the time. My favorite time to steelhead is from July back up through April. And at that point, I think about it all the time. Well, I think about it even now, but I'm just thinking about what I'm going to do in July through April.
Suppose tomorrow morning you're going fishing. Do you sit down tonight and get out your flies and go through them?
I'll get them out. I'll probably feel like I have to tie a couple because, no fly is as good as the one you just tied. I don't tie like I used to. When I was in high school, tying flies obsessively substituted for my social life.
So they're made out of basically like spit, bubble gum, and like telephone wire, pretty much. That's what you make them out of?
Well, you might want to add thread, feathers, fur, some tinsels.
It's like jewelry making, right? I mean, you need like tweezers and things, and right? I mean,
yeah, there's a vise. My grandma bought me my first fly tying vise for my 11th birthday.
well, that's neat.
It was a wonderful gift.
Aren't there guys who like fly tying as much as fishing?
There are guys that tie flies and don't even fish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen them. I've seen flies framed and such. They're really pretty. Some of them.
The traditional salmon flies in the kind of the British era were the gillies who managed the rivers that were owned by royalty and wealth would actually be assigned to design flies that the people they worked for were the only people that could have flies like that because they're the only people that could get the feathers because the feathers were so exotic. The fly tying guys have gotten so nuts about materials that a kid broke into the British Museum and stole bird pelts to sell the feathers on the internet
Oh my gosh.
and got busted.
Oh, I love that.
If I want to go fly fishing, what's it going to cost me to get a complete setup? I'm sure you can go into the millions, but
Oh, you can, yeah.
That is such a Walt question. Walt, that's a perfect Walt Thomas question.
I would think if you wanted to just barely get your feet wet and try it, you could get a starter setup and a few bugs for like $250. If you are going to really want to get after trout fishing, you probably want some decent waders, which are going to cost you another $250.
With the waders, though, is it like a kilt that you don't wear any underwear with them?
Well, I don't really want to get into people's personal habits, Grace.
I know. It's gross.
Waders are basically sweaty, so I would actually recommend something a little wicking, maybe.
A wicking layer.
A wicking layer. There are a couple guys in the spay community that love to show up in kilts,
Oh, really? That's funny.
and I've never wanted to be anywhere near them when it's windy.
How could you get in your waders with a kilt?
I think waders in a kilt are going to be bonchy.
I don't know how you do that.
What is bonchy from? Bonchy is from
I've never heard that word.
that's not from, what's the movie with the models? Blue Steel.
Oh, Zoolander.
Yeah, it's not from bonchy. It's not from that. is it?
No, it's not, because I've seen that about 15 times because of my son.
Oh, so you can quote Blue. You can quote my two youngest, Todd and Elizabeth, will go back and forth with movie quotes from like 8 movies and have a conversation that no one else understands.
how about just forget the waders and the, that kind of stuff, but the pure fishing gear?
Well, you can get like a basic setup of a rod, a reel, a line, just a starter setup for probably $200, and then you need something to keep your flies in. You probably need $100 worth of flies.
Wow.
So you need a box. You need a couple of tools.
So can you consider yourself a fly fisher if you don't make your own flies? If you buy?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of people. A lot of people don't want to.
Okay. But is it snobby? Is it snobby to not want? Are you snobby about only doing your own flies, or are people not like that?
I have to admit, when I got really serious about painting, it used up a lot of my desire to make things because I make things constantly now.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that kind of drive is burnt out. And so, I'm happy to dig through a box and use a fly that is fine to me, and whether I tied it or not.
So I could go to Walmart and get for $4.99.
No, you could.
Walmart.
I could get a bobber and a little reel and go fishing tomorrow morning for $4.99.
At Walmart, you spend $19.95.
But you want me to spend $2.50? I could probably get $20 waiters there too.
$20 waiters.
You could, and you're gonna get wet pretty quick. My guess is you could probably find a $45 fly rod there, a $15 to $20 reel. So yes, you could try it. The problem is going to be if that's going to be enough to help you fall in love with it.
Doesn't sound like the way to go.
That is true, though, in almost anything that you might do.
Yeah.
If you're cheaping out, you're not going to get the best experience from it.
Yeah.
Nobody makes a bad rod anymore. Even the cheap rods are good. But the cheap intro spay rods, and I don't mean they're cheap rods, they're more affordable. And I think
I want to start with a two-handed 18-footer.
Gee.
If two-handed 18-footer, you're looking at probably a $1,200 to $1,800 rod.
Oh my God.
What do they make the rods out of? I mean, you said graphite, but did they used to make them from bamboo or something? What did they make them from?
The first ones were made from a wood.
And
I can't remember the name of the wood.
Willows?
Eventually they were made from bamboo, then glass, and then the thing that really made it take off in North America, Canada, and the U.S. was when graphite technology met spay rods, because all of a sudden they got light. And then a few other guys developed new line systems that made it much easier to cast a spay rod.
In the movies, whenever they want to show like military industrial complex CEOs and Illuminati and people like that, the two sports are like fox hunting and fly fishing.
Well,
really?
Rick is denying his elitist roots here.
Who's a fly fisher? Dick Cheney.
Yeah, right.
Did he ever kill anyone while he was fly fishing? Well, he didn't kill the person. He just shot someone.
That's the less lethal side of the field sports. I have been hooked. I have hooked myself.
Yeah, ouch.
Fishing with my friend James and our friend Bobby. With spay, you have to be very wind aware because you're making a big loop of line. And if you make that loop on the side where the wind is blowing against you, you can blow your cast right into you. And I was distracted over some personal things. And didn't I make the same cast I'd been making on the other side of the river, taking into account the wind? But by being on the opposite side of the river, you make the opposite cast, and I didn't. I pierced my nostril.
Ow!
And I was using a fly. I was using a fly called a tube fly, which is actually tied on a tube with a separate hook. And I could look down my line and see the back of my fly, and had to figure out that it was through my nose.
Poking out of your nose.
Yeah, and so I tried, but I had crimped the barb, but the barb had broken, so there was still what you would call a micro barb, and I couldn't get it out.
Oh,
I looked downstream, and James is about 350 yards down, and there was really good water between me and James, and it doesn't hurt. And so
You just cut it off.
I cut the hook off and left it there, and put a new hook on, and went back to fishing. And I fished down to James.
Good for you, Rick.
And
oh my God.
James said, "Any luck?" And I said, "Just one big dud." And he turns around and he blanched. And James has been a fishing guide for like 15, 18, 20 years. He'd never had to take a hook out before.
Really? I mean, you must have been bleeding, right?
And I said, "James, you'd never plucked a hook?" "I'm a rank amateur, and I've taken them out of like people's heads, their ears, their eyelids." He goes, "No, I've never pulled a hook." And I said, "Okay, well, I pulled a bunch. I'll show you how. So I rigged it up for him to do it. And I said, the real trick is, tell him you're going to do it on 3 and then not do it on 3. You're supposed to do, 1, 2, 3, pluck, and then you do it on 2.
But wait a minute, don't you like cut off one end so there's an end that doesn't have a barb on it?
Right.
You can't push it through. So this was through my nostril.
Whoa.
So if we'd had big cutters, we could have pushed it through and just slipped it. But it's still got the eye of the hook that I'm going to have to pull through that hole.
God.
So we're going to back it out. I've got it all worked out. I got one finger up my nostril, another jam on the shank down into the bridge of my nose. And then he's got a loop of 40-pound test line. He's going to pop it out. And so James says 1 and plucks it out. And then he's so sure of himself. He goes, you didn't expect that, did you? I said, of course I knew you were going to do it on 1.
Oh, jeez.
So the best part is,
Wow.
your nose bleeds a lot, but it doesn't. If you've seen my nose in the last 20 years, you know it's been broken a lot. My nose has been broken like 7 or 8 times.
What?
And it never hurts that bad.
You mean while you were kayaking and such?
Starting from a little kid. Fist fighting, sports. I never broke my nose kayaking.
Oh.
Bar fights.
I did cut my face up once, but didn't break my nose.
Huh.
Literally, that's something that always put me off about fishing is I always thought those flying hooks, what if you catch that in the eye?
Yeah.
The first time I hooked myself, I was fishing the Deschutes River, and I hooked myself in the jaw so solidly that I had the barb hooked off, and I reached up to pull the flat, and I couldn't get it out because I'd sunk it in my jawbone.
Oh, my God.
I had to grab a pair of forceps and clamp it onto the hook and pluck it out.
Oh, my God.
So I've hooked my scalp, my ear, my nostril, my arm.
My God.
Fishing with my buddy Alex Saverniak. His son came tearing back downstream, and I said, Alex, what's the matter? He goes, I went to take a picture of Cole casting, and he hooked me in the eye. I said, in the eye or the eyelid? And he said,
Oh, my God.
in the eyelid. I blinked just before I saw the fly. And I said, did you put a fly on for him? And he said, no, why? And I said, because he was fishing my fly. It's barbless.
Oh, thank God.
So he turned around and I said, okay, you haven't blinked. He said, no. So I took a picture of him, and then with the fly in his eyelid, and the fly slid right out. Fortunately, it was a small fly, and fortunately our eyelids are thick, and so it didn't get to his eyeball.
God.
I'm an eye freak. The thing that I can't handle are eye injuries.
Oh, my God.
And if you look on the internet, there are the grossest hooks in eye pictures.
Is there a website?
Probably. I'm not looking at it.
Yeah.
Walt is the interrupter, too, which I was missing
He
before.
is an interrupter.
I have 2 buttons to think about for you guys to think about. Sharks are far more ancient than dinosaurs.
Really?
Huh.
And second, humans are more closely related to salmon than salmon are to sharks.
Related to both of those, Al Troll is an artist in Alaska who's fascinated by sharks. He had an exhibit of his paintings at the University of Oregon about all the bizarre ancient sharks. There were saber-toothed sharks. There were sharks that had teeth like saw blades vertically in their mouth. Amazing.
I don't have any thoughts related to that at all.
Well, I have one more question. Is a river guide, is that an oxymoron? Here's what I'm saying. If you're a river guide, how hard is it?
Yeah, you can only go one way, right?
You're on the river. 2 days later, we're still on the river.
Oh my God! You have to hear the number of stories of clients who tucked something in the bushes at the start of a river trip, assuming they'd be able to get it at the end, because they thought the river went in a loop.
What?
Oh my God.
Yes, true. And those stories are endless. Excuse me. Sorry, Walt, that's an edit out there. Do you hear that clack? That goes with my burp. I don't know where that came from. Sorry.
I'll make it louder.
I just did
Slow it down and put an echo on it.
It'll just be like, whoa. Now I gotta get back to her. Isn't aging wonderful?
What flies are made out of.
I'm just glad I didn't fart.
Oh, I would have liked that better if you did. Oh my God.
Well, on that happy note, another episode of Charbroiled Chats comes to a close. But rest assured, whatever you would like to talk about, we are listening. So go ahead, tweet us at CharbroilC or email us at charbroiledchats@gmail.com. Of course, we'd love it if you'd head over to iTunes or YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts and write a review of Charbroiled Chats. And please, subscribe, like, follow, comment, and most of all, tell all your friends about Charbroiled Chats. See you next time.